is Edin Mujkic. I'm an assistant professor at School of Public Affairs, originally from Bosnia, and I teach only one class in public administration field, which is Introduction to Public Administration, but my field of studies and research is the national security and foreign policy. When I applied for Daniel's ethics funds, I was thinking what to do curriculum-wise that will involve ethics in public administration and what classes to actually apply that to. So I choose two classes. One is Introduction to Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and another one is Introduction to Public Administration. So what those two fields have together, like Homeland Security, National Security, Pentagon, and Public Administration.
They deal with public. They deal with not necessarily internal constraints, but they deal with external influences.
Well, public administration is a bureaucracy, right? We're talking about bureaucracy, and Pentagon is the biggest bureaucracy in the U.S. military. I have a bunch of military students that are either active or former military, and every time we talk, they're oh yeah, we write a bunch of papers every day. That's what we do. So they're the biggest bureaucracy. So Master of Public Administration this year they have 187 students. I was just talking to Krista Hill. We were at Fort Carson this morning. We are now around 175. But anyway, for a public administration program to be considered a large program, you have to cross 170. So we crossed that, but we have a number of faculty like we are a small program. So we are still struggling with that. Mostly our students are not traditional students. They have regular jobs. I have a student from Denver who has 3 jobs, and he's a parole officer, and 2 other jobs are not Starbucks jobs, they're actually real jobs. So it's challenging sometimes, but mostly they are military, either former or active, law enforcement, etc., etc. So it's a non-traditional student body. We have 6 graduate certificates that can be used. Those classes are actually graduate classes, and they're used as electives, and most of my teaching actually is in a graduate certificate classes, the National Security Foreign Policy, and just one core class that I already mentioned. So we have graduate certificate in Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I'm the person actually running this, and the other certificate is National Security Intelligence, also certificate that I'm running. It's the second best performing graduate certificate in School of Public Affairs after the National Security Intelligence. It's a focus on first responders and retiring military personnel. So basically, the students who are taking these classes are either active military that plans to retire. I don't know when, but they have planned. And usually after that, they go either the contracting for DoD or DNI, or they go into law enforcement, homeland security, etc., etc., and to utilize their previous knowledge. So that's our targeting group, but we see also more and more traditional students than before, mostly from our CJ undergrad program that now has 600 students. We focus on strategic issues and not tactical issues. This is important for what I'm going to talk about today in this class. A lot of homeland security programs in this country, some in big universities that we all know about them, completely focus on terrorism. Like terrorism is the beginning and the end. If we just solve the terrorism issue, we're going to solve all our problems in our lives. And why do you think that's the case? Why do they focus so much on terrorism?
It's a huge focus on our culture and our climate now. We've been in Iraq and Afghanistan now for 10 years, and because they still haven't taken out all of the terrorists, so they don't have a handle on that. You have once the Taliban, and it was ISIS, and then there's all these other different groups in different countries, and so in order to craft a response to that, that's why the focus is there rather than on a lot of other issues.
But that's a national security issue.
Oh, okay.
That's not homeland security.
Oh, homeland.
Yes, but you're right.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that terrorism is a moneymaker.
Mm-hmm.
When you tell students, or prospective students, terrorism, it's sexy. It's always on the TV. You know, when you have a terrorist attack, boom, that's on TV. You know, when Stephen Hawking died, well, you know, he died. You know, but if it's some terrorist attack somewhere, because journalism, the good news is not the news. You know, it's a bad news is always what sells, and terrorism it sells. But you're talking about national security issue, and Homeland Security issue wasn't when issues come across our border. Problem with terrorism in the United States, we don't have a lot. We do much better job than Europe, for example, when it comes to the prevention, counterterrorism and prevention intelligence. What kind of relation, for example, we have with the Muslim community in the United States? Our law enforcement, what kind of relation has with the Muslim community compared to European countries? It's a completely different approach and issue. So itself, we don't focus on that. We focus on strategic issues. So for example, in this certificate, we have classes that we have as introduction to Homeland Security and emergency management, major issues in national and Homeland Security, because whatever is national security, tomorrow might be a Homeland Security. You know, so that's why that matters.
That's why I had a connection in
yes,
my mind.
exactly. And we have international relations and foreign policy, and emergency management leadership class. All those classes are there to address several issues, terrorism being among these. Like, is it natural disasters, climate change, etc. So all the plethora of threats toward the local community, regional community, or the nation. So not just terrorism. So we focus on the strategic issues, what we are doing today to address the problems in the future. You know, not just do we have some guy running, you know, now in Colorado Springs, which has to do a lot with this presentation. So addressing the National Funded Ethics Initiative principles in the PA curriculum, this spring I'm teaching PAD 5001. It's an introductory class. That's usually the first class that students in a PAD program are going to face with, or a second semester at the latest. So it matters really what they are exposed to when it comes to presenting what is the public administration. And most of them think that they know everything about it, so it becomes challenging. And then last semester I taught PAD 5960, which is Introduction to Homeland Security and Emergency Management class. This is a required class, PAD 5001. Everyone has to take it. I'm teaching spring and summer, and Dr. Klinger is teaching in the fall. I already addressed this. 30 to 34 students this semester started, which is a lot for a graduate class, especially when I don't do tests, I do book review and policy paper, which is a lot of reading on my part. And 26 to 30 finished semester. I think this year is going to be 27, probably 26. So next year probably we're going to split this class in two sections in a spring 2019, just because it's becoming, PAD 960, it's only offered in the fall semester. These classes are on a yearly rotation. 10 to 15 students, again, like I said, mostly former active military. Again, focus on strategic approaches, and like I said before, terrorism is just one of many topics. Actually, I just have 1 week this semester in a class called Major Issues in National Homeland Security that I'm teaching. I was teaching actually this class yesterday. Just 1 week that addresses terrorism. No, actually, sorry, 2. One is international terrorism, another one is domestic terrorism. And that's it. So 5001, 3 books are assigned. Classics of Public Administration, and I forgot to put the authors here. That's, I had to do one mistake. It's Jay Shafritz and Donald Hyde. I think it's a compilation of the most important work in public administration. It's a really good book. Politics of the Administrative Process by David Kettle, and Bad Blood, the Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment by James Jones, and that's what I'm going to talk today about. This book is not standard, and you all are aware of this experiment. It's not standard book for a classroom. It's just a regular book. I had to read this book when I was an undergrad student at Auburn University in Montgomery. the neighboring county of Macon County where the Tuskegee experiment was done. In Introduction to Public Administration class when I was an undergraduate student in political science. And it was fascinating to me because of the professor who was teaching that. He completely wrapped public administration around the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. And I think that was fascinating because I was a little bit older because I'm non-traditional student. But most of the students in that class were traditional students from Montgomery, Alabama, 20-year-olds or whatever, who don't have any idea about public administration, not to mention Tuskegee syphilis experiment. And he represented them, if you're going to this field, you better know about this. And he kind of connected us. So when I got here, I thought that this book would be really good as a midterm book review for public administration students. And some of the responses I got are pretty discouraging, but I'm going to come to that. Because we are dealing with a student body that is 30, 40-year-olds in this case, not the young kids. I assign weekly journal readings, 3 to 4 journal readings. They have to submit weekly summary of journal readings and the readings from the classics of public administration, 3 pages every week, nothing formal, I just need to see that they read it. Blackboard discussions because this is online class, and then midterm is a book review, and then they have a final project which is a research paper on a topic that they choose that is related to this class. But I'm talking about this. Our focus is a bad blood, Tuskegee syphilis experiment. The bad blood was the name of the disease, syphilis at that time. They called it the bad blood, the disease among the population. Tuskegee in Macon County, Alabama, which is still today the second poorest county in the country. At that time, I think it was number 1 or number 2. Public Health Service started in 1932, and 600 African American sharecroppers were enlisted. 399 had a syphilis, and 201 were the control group. Only men, because of the anatomical build of the man, they were signed for, not women. So original time frame for the study was 6 to 8 months, and it ended in 1972. So for 40 years the study was going on. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with this study. What happened is that in the end of 1800s, beginning of 1900, there was a possible experiment where the scientists were experimenting how in 1905 the bacteria was actually extracted and identified as syphilis. But the study in Oslo lasted for several years and on a white population, ignored, of course. And people in a public health service figured it out that, well, there are differences, at that time anatomically between black African American population and the white population, and they figured out, well, there is a reason why, syphilis attacks more African American population, so let's figure it out that. Of course, it didn't have anything to do with their reasoning, but it was the racial-based decision, And they conveniently decided not to tell these people that what they're doing, which is giving them placebo tablets and telling them that they are actually treating them, which it didn't happen. Even those who were deployed in the Second World War, they didn't get a treatment because public health service went to the Department of Armies and said, don't do it, don't treat them. At that time, it was a mercury-based treatment, and they didn't get a treatment even. Although it didn't work very well, they didn't get a treatment. When penicillin was available in 1947, they also conveniently didn't administer penicillin to this population. And what is really shocking is that this was institutional. This was is culture within institution, because a lot of people rotated in a public health service when retired and everything, and the experiment still stayed alive with the support of CDC. So it was institutionally based experiment, which has a lot to do with public administration, because all of these guys were public administrators. When the news broke in '72, the government offered $25,000 for burial services, and later they were the PHS and the CDC were sued for the settlement of $10 million. But I mean, it's
fine.
yeah. So I already addressed this, that it's really a sign. Of 38 students in PhD 5001 this year, those that didn't drop. None read the book before, and only 6 were familiar with the experiment itself. I find this disturbing, because I remember the time when I was a graduate student at Auburn University, a big campus, a PhD student. I was teaching at a smaller campus, American government classes. And I would administer the citizenship test, first class. And 70% of my students would fail. That's a citizenship test for immigrants. And this reminded me of that. Because we are talking here about students who have jobs. Most of them are public administrators, actually. Have regular jobs in a city government, in state government, in the DHS, in the law enforcement, and only 6 of them were familiar with the experiment. Not to mention that no one read the book before. And it's very easy to read. 5960 class, it's one textbook assigned. It's called The Great Deluge, Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans, and Mississippi Gulf Coast. It's written by Douglas Brinkley. You know him from CNN, and obviously he's a presidential historian. Same weekly journal readings, except in this class it's 5 to 7 readings, around 250 to 300 pages every week, and they have to write a summary every week on that. Midterm book review is The Great Deluge, same concept like in a PhD 5001, and the final project policy paper on topic that they choose. And we are focusing on this. The Great Deluge in Homeland Security and Emergency Management. It's not a classic textbook. What the Great Deluge is that Douglas Brinkley was faculty at the Tulane University when Katrina happened. And he got stuck in New Orleans. And he wrote a book based on his interviews and interactions with the people during the, what was going on over there during the Katrina, in the Superdome, et cetera, et cetera. So he wrote basically, it wasn't approved, IRB approved research project, but he actually used interviews and interactions, et cetera, to write about institutional collapse in a societal collapse in New Orleans. Of 10 students, none read the book before. I actually didn't expect they were going to read this book. And most were familiar anecdotally with issues during Katrina, but we are talking here about 10 students that were either former or current military. I had 2 colonels who were actually deployed during the Katrina. So they had actually a lot of knowledge. Some of them had a lot of knowledge about what was happening, or they were directly actually involved in during the response. Actually, one of the students that was in my class last semester, he's actually right now responsible for whole emergency deployment of the Northern Command in the United States. So it was pretty good exchange there. So applying principles, why the syphilis experiment is important for the field of public administration. How does principles relate to the field of public administration, and why the Great Deluge is important for the first responders, generally governmental organizations during natural disasters. These 2 classes are very connected in the end of the day. At the end of the day, the response to natural disasters is done by the public administrators. Regardless whether they are a police or a fire, at the end of the day, that's a bureaucracy. And there is a connection here. So principles, we are aware of, I put that, we are all familiar with them. So what are the results of the quotes? Actually, these are actual quotes from the Brook reviews that I kind of extracted some of the most interesting ones. For example, that the most important step that we can take is never forgetting that this happened and teaching future generations. That's kind of like what I was envisioning applying the Bad Blood book in this class, is for these students to relate their jobs or future jobs with what happened in the Tuskegee. Keeping all of this information along with other acts displays the lack of integrity that official acted did. This is a little bit longer quote. I'm not gonna read to you, you know. But you know, this student is talking about how black community trusted the medical field, and the reason why they trusted to these doctors who were all white is that there was a nurse by the name Eunice Rivers, and she was ordered by these doctors to basically establish trust between her and these people who were basically part of the experiment and the doctors on the other side. And she's a controversial figure in this. On one hand, at that time, it was not questionable whether a nurse is going to obey the orders from a doctor. I mean, there was just no any way around. But then on the other hand, as you read the book, you're thinking like, she should know better than that. You know, there is definitely she's complicit in this experiment. You know. But then, at the same time, you're taking into consideration the whole societal factors that were going on over there, the poverty, that she was actually, you can say, privileged in that community by having that job. So it's a tough call to make it, you know. And it was a student responses to this were also kind of like, she was wrong, but I kind of feel for her. You know? They had a tough time to identify this person as someone who is truly complicit in what happened. So that was they had a problem with that. Obviously, the accountability part, the students kind of chop on that in 2 pages almost, because it's just like they were not held accountable at all. This quote I kind of bolded just to because of this. It is important whether or not the principles that I just listed were followed during the experiment, because these principles are what should make up public administration. I mean, you're talking about these principles. And that was my goal, because John Rohr in 1988 published a theory that says there is a low road and high road in ethics. Anyone wants to kind of tap on that? What is the low road and high road? So basically, the low road is you are doing everything by the law. You know, you are doing everything by the law. You're not going to go to prison. You know, high road is you're doing what's right. You might go to prison, but you're doing what's right. You know, you're doing what's ethically, or you might lose a job, but you're doing what's right, and usually that's the way to go, because you know usually implications for low road are, for institutional implications might be much higher. All the legalese you're buying, and this was the answer that actually I was looking from all students, except that only one student said this is what public administration is. This is where the Rivers found out that provided opportunities for the citizens of subjects. Some students were pretty harsh on a nurse Rivers, but you know some were not. So there was definitely that fight there. So the general agreement among students was that the experiment was horrible. But here this quote, one student says, I also found that added chapter compelling. And added chapter is talking about how the Tuskegee experiment led to the problems in an African American community of not believing government during the AIDS epidemic. Because they immediately said, well, wait a minute, why should we trust you now? You know, look at what happened just like a decade before. We just ended the experiment that was going on for 40 years. And this student says, I lived through AIDS epidemic and can see similarities of the two controversies. So definitely connection there today. The other class that talks about the great, I'm pretty fast, so if you have any questions, just ask me. Or we could keep to the end. The other class that tagged the book, The Great Deluge, the intention of assigning that book was to actually tell these students who are active in law enforcement, or generally they are first responders or might become first responders, is that actually ethical approach to natural disasters is much more important than efficiency or effectiveness. It's actually what is the ethical to do there. And in this case, some things that happen are pretty sad because, for example, the New Orleans equivalent of ASPCA, that Society for Animal Protection, actually evacuated animals from New Orleans that they were sheltering to Houston a few days before Katrina, while the government still was thinking whether to evacuate people or not. You know? So actually, that equivalent of ASPCA in New Orleans was much more effective. Effective than what government did. And the problem with the government was that there was just miscommunication between the local mayor, the state government, and then the state and the federal level. In these classes that I'm teaching, we always talk about if you need FEMA, you are already in big trouble. Not because FEMA is not effective, they are in many cases, but once you end up needing FEMA, that means that everything else that you have at your disposal failed. And the problem here was that everything that they had at their disposal failed, police deserted, etc., etc., etc. But then they still didn't establish very well communication with the federal government to convey the message to them and tell them, hey, we are really in a big trouble here. Basically what Brinkley said is that although President Bush takes a lot of blame for, people assign a lot of blame to President Bush, and there is definitely a lot to be blamed there. They actually are much more problematic was the behavior of the local and state government there, especially local government, than federal government. So these are some of the students' reactions to this, connecting these principles to this, to the book. This is Mary Landrew, who did very good job in how to be useful. These two mayors of other cities next to New Orleans, Bay Street, unlike Mayor Nagin, everything that we used to say only himself, but Mayor Nagin did is he rented an apartment in, I think it's Hilton or Hyatt in New Orleans, and basically camped there while the wars happened, and then took a week off, leaving everyone in. So this is about the mayor of the neighboring city reaction of students to that. This is the quote that talks about police, and 200 New Orleans Police Department officers basically deserted from the city. And we know New Orleans was always connected to corruption, to nepotism and everything, but this was a travesty that happened when it comes to the collapse of institutions like a police department. And then students generally praise the press and their ethical behavior to the point where they actually identify the police, for example, not wanting to help press, and how unethical that was from their part. What police did is the police took those that stayed mostly, they took that low road and doing everything by the law, to the point where they actually tackled pregnant women from looting store, getting a baby, food, and they tackled her. So by the law, they did everything correctly, but I mean, come on. So they ended up in the book. So they identified that case of tackling the pregnant woman as that unethical behavior by the police of the low road, high road approach to the issues. In all honesty, they're supposed to get the Pampers and give it to the lady. these are some other quotes, and I can definitely send this to you. So the results are that 37 book reviews were submitted. They range from 16 to 15 pages, double-spaced, 12 font. All students use Daniel's Funding Ethics Initiative principles in the review, as well as a critique of the book and experiment itself. Some students, and I think I used the wrong word here, some, I would say many students did not develop connection between experiment, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, and the public administration. And I'm having a feeling I'm going to have to put in the syllabus in the next semester, in the summer semester, when I'm going to assign this book again, connect this book to public administration, because obviously I have to tell the students in order to address that. And of course, these principles are going to stay in my syllabus in the future to serve students as an orientation point that they need to address. Students understood the importance of ethical principles during the national disaster response, but we are here talking about a little bit different composition of a class with students who are involved in that field. So what is the future work? Like I said, more guidance to students to connect those two case studies to the field of public administration and their jobs. That's definitely a must. I feel sad I have to do that in the syllabus, but there's no any other way around. And then developing journal paper around the book Bad Blood and Importance in Teaching Public Administration. I think based on this, and I'm not going to forget to put that I'm a fellow. I think I'm going to try to develop article after I finish these 8 articles I'm working right now on, for a Journal of Public Administration and Education to talk about the importance of teaching this book, because I think it's a really good case study for public administrators to jump on and learn from what not to do when they become, I don't know, bureaucrats in the city governments or something like that. So that's it. That's my presentation. Please.
I got a question on the Katrina book, The Deluge.
Right.
So Katrina is 10 years out.
Yeah.
I think almost exactly, not far off on the date there. Is there any thought to do any follow-up to see if what kind of went right and like what its impact was, or what went wrong and what its impact was?
They didn't do anything. It's sad to say last year, I think, or 2 years ago, they had a big floods in Louisiana. Same issues like the Katrina. The institutional.
Right, Harvey, I think it was, or
Harvey,
or I know.
No. They had a regular rain floods from the rains.
Oh.
It wasn't connected to the hurricanes. It was just some kind of monsoon rain or whatever. 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, Puerto Rico.
The same issues they had during Katrina popped up again. Louisiana is, and the student that was in my class who is working in the North Carolina responses to the natural disasters, and he was talking about that too. Louisiana is on par with the third world countries when it comes to and maybe even worse, when it comes to disaster response. There is no communication between governmental offices, state, local, etc. There is no funding compared to Florida, which does everything by the book, always prepared, much better prepared than other states, usually sends help to other states because they're just that good. Florida is, even when you have some deaths in Florida, like it happened last year with a few hurricanes, that's because it just must happen. I mean, there's no any way around, or there is a little bit of someone dropped the ball somewhere, but generally Florida is uber prepared. Louisiana is complete opposite of what Florida is. And that's that decentralization problem that we have in the United States. Sometimes works really good. Don Klinger and I just published a paper about Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal and ethical issues. Not published, so it's under review, where we talk about how good is the centralized governmental system in U.S. because California went after these guys, like with a sledgehammer, But then in Louisiana case, that's where decentralization doesn't work very well. And they didn't do anything. They didn't learn the lesson. I'm afraid what's going to happen next time when this then similar hurricane comes to the shores of Louisiana. I think it's going to be the same because they're already talking about 50% of water pumps are not working, etc. But you had a question.
Yeah, and on the bad blood case, you implied, I'm not sure you said it, but you implied that there was pushback in using that book?
Not pushback. It's generally not used.
Okay, so
I don't know why.
Oh,
No. I don't know why.
There's no pushback?
No, not pushback. I just don't think.
It's not typical.
Yeah, it's like they don't think about connecting it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think. Although I knew even when I was living in Bosnia about the CD experiment, but I didn't think until I actually took as undergrad introductory class, and this professor connected that. So I think that's why.
I think it's a great idea, personally.
Yeah,
It's
so
real.
It's a real. I mean, it's a real. Matt, you had a question.
I did, but I wasn't paying attention. I hope it's not overlapping. You said some more guidance to your students to connect DFEI principles and the case study and then the actual the class and their work. What else, besides being more explicit in your syllabus, what are some of the things that you may want to do to give them more guidance to deepen their actual connection?
Before I read these book reviews, I was thinking that it wouldn't be necessary even to do that. To tell them, hey, connect these principles to the class you're taking. It's in the syllabus. I'm not sure what else is necessary except to draw a picture. Tell them, connect this to the class, to the public administration. I mean, my position on teaching is that there is so much I'm gonna serve to you.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe if even that doesn't work, then maybe that's not really where you should be. I don't know.
The student who made the connection about
Yeah.
the AIDS epidemic, like they grasped it, they got
Yeah.
it. And I think if they could do that, they can pick any issue that's on the news and they can relate it to a current event in terms of public relations and how it impacted, how it impacts that whole Tuskegee experiment. Right? So you
Exactly.
can have that correlation.
And I mean, for example, I because this is a graduate class and I don't do tests, we usually start our class with any class that I teach, with the current events. And in online classes, I address that in my videos. I talk about what's happening, for example, right now when it comes to the strength of institutions in the United States. And I'm a national security person. And I have a hard time explaining to students that the United States is not superpower because we have 11 aircraft carriers. And I don't know how many thousands of tanks and whatever. Soviet Union had a bigger military than the United States. They had much more tanks, much more nuclear weapons. They had actually better developed multiple re-entry vehicle technology than we did. And yet what happened? They collapsed. So it's the strength of the institutions, education, healthcare, etc., that makes a country superpower. The military is just a product of that. And I have a hard time explaining that to students that what's happening right now in the United States with our political divisions and everything actually matters much more than whether DoD budget is going to be $690 billion or $700 billion. I don't think it matters at that point. So
you're running for office?
no, no, actually not yet at least. So, yeah.
I know that this is the intro class, but again, back to the bad blood example. I was thinking of, I don't know her name, but who is it over in, she's the one who, integrity for research integrity.
Institutional research. Kelly Klebe.
Yeah, maybe
Robin
it's
Worski?
Robin. That's what I'm
Okay.
thinking of. Thank you. Anyway, when we do the CITI training, they talk about the Tuskegee experiment, and so hopefully it will come back to students. But I wonder. I know from anecdotal evidence that you do pack your class. I don't know if there's even time for this, but I wonder if she would be willing to do like a mini guest lecture in your class to tie things together to research integrity or how that prompted.
We would have to do it, but it has to be done online because this is really the intro to PA, although I'm not a big fan of online classes, I have to make a disclaimer here. I do teach this class online, And so it would have to be a video or something like that, you know, or maybe if it's some kind of an event that I
Yeah.
can tell students, hey,
To-
take an event, I can give you some credit, you know. Like for example, this class I'm teaching right now, National Security and Homeland Security.
You have them go to the debate.
Because it was the same time that my class is, so I told them, hey, we'll watch Vicente Fox and Farage, and so that's something that we can definitely talk about, you know, because definitely I think that this case, you know, is something that needs to be pushed in the public administration.
And I have one more really quick one.
Yeah, sure.
And then for the other class, you mentioned if folks are calling FEMA, they're probably not to discredit, but just it's putting things in a tough spot. I know that the class is about the students as public administrators and stewards. Do you talk at all about the ethical responsibilities of individual citizens and kind of preparedness, or that's probably
No, we do talk
You do.
about it because it's a seminar type of lecture. So I don't, you know, I have right now I have a student who is training Mexican special forces, and he's an extraction guy in case our military gets kidnapped in Mexico. He's the one who goes to get them out.
Wow.
He's my student. So lecturing people like that is tough because they usually have one master's degree or two. I had a guy with 4. They did a lot in their life, so I'm a facilitator there, and that comes out to all this. What is the individual responsibility of citizens when it comes to preparedness? And it's tough. You can't make someone being prepared.
Right.
Even if they have supplies, just for the sake of argument, they don't want to be prepared. They're just not going to be.
Yeah.
So that always comes, and there are strategies around how to make people, but in the end of the day, people are
They're human.
They're human.
They're human, yeah, exactly. We're dealing with humans, and they are not perfect, you know.
Sure.
And we can even, Colorado Springs, we had our share of natural disasters, but it's still relatively peaceful area. For example, New Orleans is always, you're always in the back of your mind is that hurricane. Or when I live in San Diego, there's always in the back of your mind the earthquake. And even government in California tells you must have insurance. So there's always behind it.
Yeah.
But still people are, and that's one of the problems is that people get used to live with the threat.
Yeah.
And that's the human nature, because I remember when I was in war in Bosnia, for example, in Sarajevo, they were always, on average, they had like 3,000 grenades every day that fell in the city and sniper shooting, but yet they had pageant contests and things like that. So, the life goes on, and you just kind of put that on the side and you live with that.